cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
Today on the podcast, I'm bringing on some guys that I'm very fired up to talk to because we're kind of in and around the same space. So I hope this is a good one where we can compare notes. But I got Lucas and Jackson on, the co-founders of Darkroom. But guys, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, Jim, thanks so much for having us. We appreciate it. And I think Jackson and I are probably going to be talking over one another with each question. So we'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, we can find a synthesis and just say the same thing at the same time. No, but Jim, thanks for having us. I think we are doing very similar things. So I'm excited to pick your brain a little bit and flip things around on this hour-long chat we've got.
Flip the script. It'll be like the wrestling of a 3-man pod and like who's interviewing who. So this should be really nice. But no, it's been fun because having a growth marketing agency, going through what you guys are doing some stuff really well, just what you've built and the branding. But before we get all into it, for people listening, like, wait, who the heck are these guys? What is Darkroom? Like, what is Darkroom? And can you speak to anything around like the size of the company so people really understand the scale?
Yeah, so I can take that one. We really started off, like, our inception was just, totally different from where we're at now. And I'm sure, Jim, you have a similar story. Right now, we're really focused on growth strategy, working with our clients on building scalable and commercially viable revenue programs. And that really boils down to 5 core competencies that we have at the agency: a lot of acquisition media, customer retention, data and analytics, creative, and then web optimization or digital product work. So those are kind of the functional areas where we go deep. Right now, we're about 70 people. We're hovering around that mark. Jackson and I have been growing the agency for over 5 years now. We're going to be approaching 6 in September. And the digital media landscape has just changed very drastically in that time as we've transitioned to a really direct consumer focused media agency, as well as just like a direct consumer, I think, advertising economy at large. And where we're at now, where, it's certainly more omni-channel and creatively driven, and there are a bunch of different dynamics at play. So we've had to adapt through those years. We've certainly changed because of that. But yeah, that's kind of the 2 cents on us.
No, that's awesome. And I mean, it's super impressive. Started 5 years ago, hitting 70 people. And I'm like you, where if someone went to the Wayback Machine of my company, they'd be like, wait a minute, like what you're doing now is a little different from what you did at the start. Cause I think it's easy for people to just go on Darkroom right now and be like, oh, wow, this is amazing. These guys have had it figured out from day one. But like, go back to those early days. Like, how did it start and how has it changed?
Yeah. Well, just to be frank with you, a bunch of our early clients were pretty shit, nothing exciting. And it's funny now because a lot of the agencies that we looked up to, that we've kind of modeled ourselves around, or, analyzed their business models, and we're like, okay, these are things that we want to replicate. We're now getting compared to those players, or we're neck and neck. And now it's just about kind of building this future that is different than what other people have done. So that's exciting. I think we as founders got really lucky from a business development and client relationship perspective. We had some early clients that really allowed us to expand our brand with them, that really propelled us forward. Even now, though, we're still delivering pitches, getting into situations where we're kind of a bit outside of our comfort zone, especially right now when there is so much chaos in the media market, that we can actually have like an industry leading perspective, and people are like, okay, what do you guys think? So yeah, I mean, going back to the early days, I mean, Jackson was driving Uber, I was in school. We were just trying to consult. We were really just trying to make money. And then we had a string of initial engagements, and then we had two really I think big early clients. One was a large education institution where I went to school, and then the other was a top 5 entertainment celebrity. And those kind of propelled us forward, and I think we developed with those businesses. And then it was just a question of on to the next client, bigger brand, more capabilities, more competency, honing in our niche, the typical stuff.
Nice.
It's
Wait,
totally
so go ahead, Jackson. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. No, I just want to say, like, it's totally a ladder. We were
Holy crap. Can you guys hear Jackson right now?
No, I think we just lost you. I thought that was me for a sec.
Oh no.
Nothing. So what he's trying to say, I'll interpret. we ran into this issue a couple podcasts ago. We were talking to Sam Blumenthal, he's a great mind in the commerce space, and we were just having some internet issues, and we had to start the pod like 30 minutes late. But I think Jackson will come back in here and be live.
Yeah, we can edit this out. No one will ever have to know. But actually, I'm interested. Like, so how did you and Jackson meet though? Even before like getting to your first clients, how did you guys know? Like, oh, we should work together, and like talk about that.
Yeah, we started as friends. And Jackson was really friends like with my brother. They were like really good friends. They went to USC together in California. I met Jackson through that. He was working on a company at the time, and we had kind of like tangential spaces. I was working in accessories. He was working in apparel. We were both in the direct consumer space, and we just had like some mutual respect for one another. And then Jackson's an incredibly talented graphic designer by trade. We collaborated on a couple items. My second company, software business, Jackson designed the user interface and experience for that product. And we had great chemistry, and we were like, we were working with a design dev agency at the time, and we were like paying them a lot of money. And we were like, we could do this 10 times better. And that's how it started. We just started consulting in that way.
Nice. And so, okay, so you're like, okay, there's some like co-founder market fit here. You mentioned those first two clients because so many people that like started in consulting or agencies, like, how do you get your first clients? Like for me, I was in New York, and I was doing mentoring through like Techstars, and I was like, I'll work for free. And that and like teaching led to mine. But I mean, you got two big ones out of the gate. One, an education institution, and then the second, I heard like entertainer celebrity. Like,
yeah, it was Dwayne Johnson's team. So like,
nice.
Cream of the crop in terms of personalities in the entertainment space.
Yeah, how do you land that when you're a supposed nobody? What are you guys doing? What wheels are you greasing?
That's the thing. It was just one of those situations where I think with any consulting business, it really starts with network. It's like you tap into your network, you see how far that goes, and that opens doors, and you obviously have to take advantage of those opportunities. And then, when you really try and scale, like the point where we're at right now, it's like my personal network, Jackson's personal network, can only take us so far. You need systems for generating revenue now. But yeah, I mean, our first clients, we like worked for, an NYU startup. I think our first client, they paid us like $800 or something for like a pretty clean UI. It's like, mine as well should have been free. And then we just kind of, greased the wheels. UNC was nurturing that relationship for a while. They were an investor in my software company. And then the DJ Rock Connect came actually through Jackson. Someone I think he went to school with worked at the media and management company. So just kind of like get an intro, see what happens. You got good pricing, it fits, and you get a chance to perform. I remember Jackson and we took that meeting, Jackson, in that office in Beverly Hills, and we were like, we're
I think we stayed up all
this.
night preparing for that. Yeah, it was an all-nighter. We were exhausted the next day in front of their whole team, but we put our best foot forward and they gave us a shot. And that's what I was trying to say earlier. You have to take every chance that you're given and take some risks with it to like prove your skill set and prove that you have a perspective on what you're doing. What for us, that was branding, it was digital products at first. And then you just expand from there. And it's a beachhead, and then you just slowly grow. And Lucas was mentioning, like, over the years, we started to learn more and more about what our clients needed that they were getting from someone else that was providing those services at a subpar rate, or they weren't able to find at all. And so we just started to slowly expand the amount of competencies that we had and hire better and better people that are way smarter than us. And, you know, now we're just standing on the shoulders of those people trying to peer into like, what's the next set of systems or competencies that brands are going to need. And it's been crazy because our business has had to change like every 6 months. I think it gives our team whiplash sometimes, but it's necessary given like all the dynamics that are happening. I wonder, like, do you feel that? This is a genuine question. Do you feel like your agency changes every 6 months, or are you kind of like committed to a core set of services that you've just stuck with for the past, you know, couple years?
Yeah, I have a similar feeling, but I position almost different, where I struggle with wanting to be everything to everyone, to not say no to business, versus starting to say no and niche down to just focus on one thing and be like best in class in that. And I struggle sometimes on that. I also struggle with, you know, where, like, because I used to like get a lot of clients doing one core thing, but now I'm like, actually, as we work with like Shopify and DTC, how can we go deeper and do more things? Because we've actually found that's worked out really well for us as we've really like upped our game on like website development and creative. And so I think that helps us like reshape, because it's funny, I was interviewing somebody and he goes, hey, in one interview you say you're a growth agency, in another interview you say you're a CRO agency. What are you? And I was like, man, that's a good question, because it can totally not change, but like the way you position it can be different for audiences. You're not trying to be misleading, but it's just the way it is. And so it is hard. And I think you do want to be this person that's like, oh, look at an interview from me 5 years ago. What I said we were going to do, we did. But it's also like, in our landscape of digital marketing, it is this like ever-changing landscape that you need to adapt with. And so I think you have to be flexible. At least that's what I tell myself.
Yeah, no, I think we approach it the same way. And the way I like to think about it is from the consulting perspective is, you know, we're not afforded the same privileges as B2C businesses, where you can be running a series of different advertisements, like on paid social, for instance, that have, you know, permutations within a given ad set or within certain audiences that you're trying to target that speak to those audiences in particular ways that are going to appeal to them. Like, we just don't have that privilege. A lot of our sales is hand-to-hand combat. It's getting on the phone, it's B2B, it's understanding and listening to your customer. And then you tailor your pitch to what their needs are. On the agency side, you can do so many different things. We have so many capabilities. We're malleable, flexible, et cetera. So, you know, but you still need to convey what you do, all of the different capabilities, in a really, really simple, easy to understand way to the client. That's tough for a lot of people, but that's why you're a CRO agency and a growth agency and a web design agency all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And like, because we struggle with this all the time. We're like, we've even tried to simplify. We're like, we're a growth team. That's the one thing we do. And within that, yes, there's lots of complexities of, we drive traffic, we do website stuff, but it's like trying to keep it simple, because I think the worst thing, especially with the team when you're growing, you don't want them to be like, wait, we're what now? It's like, no, we're still the core thing, but it's like, you know, the language can change a little bit. But one thing that I'd be interested in, so I've a million questions as we compare notes, but like, I guess I'll go this path. Like, getting to 70 people is no small feat. There's this book, I'm going to butcher the name, but it's like Big Profits, something numbers. And our interim CFO had us read it. And it talks about the black hole of death for businesses. And it's when you're over 20 people and between 1 to 5 million in revenue, because you are at this point where you desperately need these layers of management and systems and process. And you also need to invest in growth. But to be able to do both those things, it's really hard. You're either having to be super profitable, super efficient, or you tap into outside capital. And as you guys, and I think the black hole is like either 20 to 50 or 20 to 75 people, but you guys are clearly going up that curve, hopefully getting out of the black hole. Maybe you're already out of it. But like, what are some of those? I'm happy to compare notes on like our pains and mistakes, because we were much more profitable as a 10-person company than as like a 35-person company, from like a per person standpoint, because you don't have those layers. But what are some of those growing pains as we go down this kind of linear path of like, okay, two guys have these complementary skill sets, they're getting deals. You go from being these rock star consultants to building up a team. What's advice you would give to people that are wanting to break through to build that team? And what are mistakes you made where like, okay, if you're going to do this, don't make this mistake?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I guess I'll take this one first, Jax. Yeah, I think the black hole situation is very real because you need layers of management and expenses just to scale the business to that next level. I think one of the mistakes we made was, taking our growth for granted and just being like, you know what, if we just keep growing, this business eventually will get to the profitability that we need and we'll be able to sell it and it'll be valuable and, et cetera, et cetera. And at a certain point during that growth, we realized like, oh shit, like maybe this isn't playing out by exactly as we thought by the numbers, and we need to get a little bit more structured with it. So my number one advice for a consultancy, like a services-based business that is scaling and is starting to make the first couple hires, is to really invest in a financial model that gives you a lot more clarity. It doesn't need to be super sophisticated, but just gives you a lot more clarity into your business drivers and the things that are going to get you to that profitability, where when you go into an acquisition and you have a 12-month look back, you're really happy with the end result. It's getting you to those North Star goals that you have for your business. So I think the financial model is crucial. It's something that we went really deep on, and now small changes in the business, all those situations are anticipated and they don't have that much effect on, our end result. And I mean like increases in salary, promotions, small deviations in churn, these things that are natural and to be expected of the business. If you plot those out financially, small deviations, things to be expected, they're not going to seriously derail you from where you're going. And that's an important perspective to have as an executive when you're trying to make decisions.
Will you break down when you say invest in a financial model? What does that mean? Is that getting aligned on like, okay, here's our cost structure, here's how we go to market with price and how we're going to staff up these deals, or give more color on what that means?
Yeah. So there's a number of different ways. There are various different ways that you can get the model built. Whether that's like a fractional CFO or a full-time CFO or a finance person or, whatever it might be. But the exercise of thinking through what your business drivers are is really important on the executive side. When you're starting a consulting business, it's like, okay, I'm going to have these resources handle this amount of accounts fractionally, and that's going to result in this amount of profit. As you become more complex, as your business becomes more complex and you want to charge higher premiums for the services that you're offering, you're inevitably going to have, scopes with multiple resources. You're going to have different timelines for those resources. That's going to influence.
OpEx increases.
Yeah, your OpEx is going to increase.
Honestly, it's your operating costs at the end of the day that weigh everything else down. Sorry to cut you off, but just keep going.
No, it's a great point. Yeah, your OpEx increases for those employees. Capacity is impacted in terms of when you can take on new deals. So it's important just to understand that and to understand what levers you can pull. I mean, one, to have clarity into a per diem, like a per scope basis, what the profitability of your business looks like. Like if you just sold one deal, what is the your GP on that deal, and then factoring in all of that overhead, what is your expected net income on that deal, assuming that you just sold that deal at 100% capacity. And then, from there you can play around with different simulations. If I improve my cost structure with this one resource, how does that influence my net income? Things like that are really important.
And by the way, it's the same for B2C too. Like you're looking at different unit economics, but you have to go through the same process when you're trying to scale to 7 figures in annual revenue. If you're trying to cross the 8-figure, 10 million in revenue threshold, you need to be looking at what's your gross margin, what's your contribution margin, what's your landed margin on every product to make sure that your unit economics are really solid. Otherwise, you may be engaging in all these activities like advertising or organic, whatever, or straight up manufacturing, and you're actually losing money on every unit sold, which is very easy to get into in a business like ours. So I just want to mention, like, it's the same sort of mental model or financial model, whether you're B2B or B2C. You have to go through that math.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because it's easy to be like, oh, we're growing, it's going well. But like, if you don't have your finances dialed in, it can really catch up to you. And it gets really scary when your burn rate gets bigger and bigger, because the cost of that can be very significant. And one thing, I think, Jackson, you had some really cool LinkedIn posts I was checking out just around like the growth. I believe, did you guys take on a little bit of funding as well? Is that correct?
Yeah, basically Jackson and I basically sold a couple points of equity relatively recently. It wasn't a large capital raise though. We were basically just taking some chips off the table, and also bringing in, mostly it was like family and friends, some family offices, just, people in our network to participate in our upside, basically.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily like a lot of growth capital to fund team or marketing. It was more like, hey, let's take some money off the table, let some other people participate, but it's not to fund growth.
Yeah, that's how we thought about it. We didn't, like, I wouldn't consider our series seed, which is what it was, I wouldn't consider it like growth equity by any means. Like, I think the traditional types of fundraising that service-based businesses go through, like our types of service-based businesses, like a growth equity investment from a PE partner, that would look a lot different, and we would be engaging in like roll-ups or other sorts of activities. It wasn't like that. We just wanted to get other people in our network involved in the future of what we were building, and to an extent that funded some growth initiatives that we had, but it's not like we were deploying massive amounts of capital in really key initiatives or M&A developments.
Gotcha. You're not buying billboards in Times Square just yet with the funding.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Soon.
One thing that's interesting, I don't know if you guys fall into this, like a lot of people when they're starting something, like pricing is so freaking hard. I've made every mistake on pricing that one can make when it comes to an agency, whether it's like hourly or project or retainer or value-based pricing. One thing that when reading the book Built to Sell, it really kind of talks about productized services. And I feel like you guys could agree or disagree with this. I feel like there's like two extremes you should play in, and you shouldn't be in the middle. One is like be a productized service where it's like a lower cost, but it's like you hit a button and you get a service, but it's delivered like a product. That's kind of what we're doing with One Day Design. And then the other extreme is like be premium and be that like a high-end agency. Yes, it might be more custom than productized, but it's worth it. And where it gets really dangerous is when you're in the middle, where you sell custom and but the truth is it's priced at a productized service. And I see a lot of agencies can spin out in that dangerous middle zone. I know because I've done that, but like, as you guys are able to get bigger clients, like how do you think about that? And does that framework even make sense? We're like, hey, let's go more premium and charge bigger. Or do you ever get the allure of, hey, we have some amazing services we do. What if we productize those and made it more scalable?
Yeah, I think that's a natural way to think about your offering. You basically are like a cost leader. And these are like tenets of competitive strategy. You're either a cost leader or you're going for a more premium segment of the market and you're charging more and you ostensibly have a differentiated product that delivers more value. So I think that's a dichotomy that you can think about as an agency owner. I think there are some principles that we as owners of consultancy and professional services firms that need to be universal. One, I mean, this is assuming you're not selling the bottom of the barrel consulting services, but you need to always have variable pricing because it's where you're always going to have cost pressure. Basically, you're a service provider, someone's trying to get a discount. So whatever your pricing in your model looks like, there's always going to be a bit of a discount on that pricing. So when you have the opportunity to actually flex up on pricing and make it more variable with customers that can afford and are looking at options that are certainly more expensive than you, and you understand that, you need to have an element of variable pricing. And on the sales side, you need that balance of understanding where you can deliver value for the price that you're going to offer, meaning the client's not going to churn after like 3 months because they're like, why am I paying so much? But I think you need to have variable pricing for sure in the professional services space. And then I think depending on how far you want to take that and where you want to sit on the super premium, super, inexpensive spectrum depends on like the market pressures at play. And I'll give you an example. Right now, there is a lot of movements going on in the marketing space. So you have like a tremendous amount of competition in the digital agency space. I forgot what the statistics are, but the amount of new entrants from 2013 to 2023, the past decade, it's staggering. It's almost like an exponential curve in terms of new agencies in the digital marketing space. And that makes sense, right? Because that's a lot of people like us and like you, apparently, who, understand the value of entrepreneurship. America is predominantly driven now by professional services. It's a service-based economy, no longer a manufacturing economy. And we are, monetizing our skill set. We're basically saying, hey, I can provide these services at X value, dollar value. And those develop into consultancies. I've talked to so many different people in the agency space who started as consultants and freelancers. So you have that market pressure going on, which is basically a threat of substitutes. And then you also have some other market dynamics going on right now. And I'm specifically talking about like media agencies, ones that manage acquisition and paid media. But you have after ATT changes on Apple, you basically have like a lot of attribution messiness where return on ad spend isn't as cut and dry as it once was. So you have a lot of CMOs who are getting backlash. They're getting kind of put in the hot seat right now because their brand marketers and their conversion focused campaigns performed really well for a long time. And their CFO is now like, hey, this media is not as efficient as it once was. And so what is that doing? The trickle down effect there is that premium agencies are also getting put on the hot seat. Large ad holding companies, which own a lot of these, larger, more premium agencies, they have pressure, from a profitability perspective being put on them. So, so let's take it a step further. I'm an agency, I'm moving upstream. I've got a great product. I'm trying to figure out where I price between the more commoditized, productized service level and then the super premium, ultra high-end level. There's a bit of a balance figuring out where you fit. And Jackson and I have talked about this at length in terms of like, where do we see ourselves? What is our unique value for the type of ICP customer that we're going after? And that conversation changes depending on what ICP customer you're going after.
Yeah.
Long-winded answer there, but yeah.
I actually want to follow up and just give a little bit more context around like how we grew. So I wouldn't like necessarily prescribe this, but there are three major milestones when I look back at our growth that I think are pretty core. The first is, as Lucas mentioned in the beginning, when we were just starting out, the only edge really that we could play with was price. So we could say, hey, look, we can provide these deliverables at a quality that is at or higher than what your alternatives are. But for the brand, they're looking at it like, well, cool, but like, how do I trust that? I can see your work, but you have a very limited portfolio. I want to make sure that the risk is as low as possible for the amount that I'm paying. So the only edge was price. So even though we were trying to build a premium brand long term, we had to be cheaper in the beginning. Then there came a point where we actually could flip and say, now we have the portfolio because we use price as an edge, and now it costs a premium to even speak to us. So we kind of flipped it, went more premium, all the while building a brand identity that is just of a higher caliber than our competitors, just from a perceived value perspective. And then we had the portfolio, which is the objective value of like, hey, we've proven this out. And now the third milestone that we're trying to build out is like a horizontal integration of basically products. So we have what Lucas is talking about, a core ICP where we have a certain cost and cost structure. And now we're trying to build other productized services on either end, stuff that's more enterprise, stuff that's cheaper. And those things create inroads to our ICP profile. So we can serve more customers, maintain our brand equity, and make more revenue at the end of the day. And I think that's a really good map to follow in B2B. So I just wanted to mention that, like, that's how we approached it, honestly, by like necessity. But I think that would apply to a lot of people who are trying to create like a legacy with their agency, and not just like an arbitrage game of like hiring freelancers and then like chilling on a beach in Mexico.
Yeah.
And Jim, to go back to your point, what Jackson just said is like, that's the only way we could reconcile how to be like everyone, everything to everyone. It's like you kind of need to, pick what products are going to work for each of, the different customer segments.
Yeah. And it's like, what can be that tip of the spear to get in? And then it's like land and expand and other opportunities. And Jackson, I think you bring up a good point. It's like, if someone's listening to this, it's like, where do you have the edge? And in the early days, you don't have much of an edge other than like you could win on price. And that's like what I did. Cause I was teaching digital marketing at General Assembly. People are like, hey, we do a marketing plan. I'm like, yeah, it's I don't know, $500. I was horrible at pricing. And then I did like free work through some VCs and startup accelerators just to build the portfolio. But then you're right. I think what you guys have done really well is know those inflection points of when to switch and be like, oh, okay, now's when we can go down this path. And I'd be interested in when it comes to getting business, because a lot of times you're getting business through your personal network, but that only scales so much. And then you have like referrals and word of mouth, but that can only scale at a certain speed that you want. Excuse me. And then the other thing is like, what channels? Because I think for us, we've accidentally been good at some channels and then we've been bad at others, in the sense that like we were doing teaching and some speaking that naturally led to some stuff. And we wrote a book that drove in some work. We've been okay on some of the paid acquisition. But we've been really bad at like, I don't go to conferences. I don't get out of my little office here. And I feel like that's really holding us back. And I think the idea of partner channels could be a huge one that we're not really tapping into. So I don't know, as you guys look at these kind of, you grow, then you hit a little bit of a wall. How have you been able to break through just from like building a business? Because I'm a little jealous, Lucas, in the sense that like you're still in New York. I miss being in New York because there's so much going on in the consumer space there where you can just like walk across the street. It's like, oh, there's the headquarters of this company and that company.
There's a lot going on here. I'm in the same boat. I don't spend as much time here as I should. I'm like, I got to spend more time. I think it's every agency finds like the channel that, there's different channels that work well for them. Some of our predecessors that we've drawn influence from, like they really milked the consumer software channel partnerships, like when the big players like Klaviyo and Shopify were fresh on the scene. I think the game has changed a little bit, a little bit now, but yeah, you got to just figure out what channels are going to deliver the most value for you, without spreading your team too thin, because there are literally so many different ways to get business. But it's important to have like the infrastructure to be able to analyze what channels, like tests that you're running, whether it's like going to conferences or hosting your own events, are actually driving profitable, customer acquisition costs for you, and at a high velocity. So there's a number of different ways that we do that. We just try and identify that. For us, what we found is direct is going to be, and like, this is just demand generation, is going to be our highest pipeline velocity by like dollar value. So there's that. And then partnerships is number 2. So like referrals, channel partners, stuff like that. So we're actively calibrating our strategy to go deeper on those 2 functions.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, we're trying to get more sophisticated there as well, because unfortunately you're talking to the head of sales for Growth Hit, for better or worse. So yeah.
Me here. Me too. Me over here too.
Yep. Jackson, I got a question for you. Like 70 people's a lot. You obviously, like, you set the standard of the quality of a lot of the creative work, but you are only so scalable. As you look to grow and build your team, how have you been able to keep the quality of work at that certain level? Because that can be hard, right? Getting these A+ players to be a part of like what you all are building, and to keep that bar as you get removed from clients. Like, what have been like the growing pains of that, or what has really worked? Oh no, I think Jackson might be on mute again. Or
He's got a lot of thoughts on this one though.
Hello?
Oh, there we go.
Okay. I don't know why that keeps happening, but let me know if I cut out again.
We're good.
Yeah, so as I always say, the thing that is the hardest to locate, to hire for, to train, it's near impossible to train, is taste level. So when you're working with like creative, whether that's design, video editing, art direction, whatever, taste level is the most elusive element that I'm always just looking for first and foremost. So I won't talk to someone in our hiring process unless I'm like, I see that off the bat that they have at least a potential of, a taste level that I can't train. And as you hire the right people with that standard, they have that taste level, and then you spend time with them and just pour into them of like, this is the vision of what we're trying to build. This is our standard. This is what we do not accept at this agency. And then you also feed them with like new visual information, new artistic information, creative information, stuff that's very subjective, so that they're absorbing. Like, the other thing I always tell our designers is you are what you eat. Like, you have to be looking at the best of the best all the time. And through that, it creates a pattern recognition, so that when you're working, you're able to tell, like, is this up to standard? Is this good? How do I make this better, et cetera? So then it just becomes a self-selective process where now, we have a manager who's basically our head of creative. We have a number of design leads, a number of design associates, and I don't worry about that hiring process. I'm not as plugged into that process as much anymore, because I trust them to make the right decisions and hire the right people, and also unfortunately fire people who just don't pan out, either on a taste level perspective or like being able to make quality decisions fast enough. That's the other element. And so like, I've just, for 5.5 years, I micromanaged the creative, to be honest. And I made sure that that if people weren't coachable enough to remain on the team, or they just didn't have the right taste level fit for our team, then we didn't stay with them. So it's just about building that culture, and then it becomes its own beast.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. It's like the simplest advice, like, just hire amazing people and they will hire other great, amazing people. But it's right. Like, I hate it when I have to relearn that sometimes. Okay, so one thing, like I mentioned that, like, you know, we're working on our own ideas. It's like, because hey, if the three of us, if we're such good growth teams, why can't we grow our own stuff, right? That's kind of like the challenge we've put on our team, and so that's been something we've gone down the path of. So if you're starting a consumer brand tomorrow, what are some of the traits you would want to have in that? And Phil, you could be like, actually, Jim, I want to talk about SaaS or B2B, but I would be interested, just because you work with so many consumer companies, what are those things, and especially if you were going to build your own thing?
Yeah, no, I like that category. I can start. I like that category because it's so difficult right now. And so I'm actually speaking to a number of startups. We actually we kind of stopped working with startups. I know that you're doing a startup studio. We stopped working with them as like an ICP. We'll still do consulting and investing and stuff like that. Just because like the amount, the speed of feedback loop you need to grow those businesses is just so fast that you have to be plugged and dialed in. And honestly, like we talked about, we're charging a premium for our services because we do really good work. It doesn't make sense for their budget. But anyway, yeah, if I was starting a CPG brand today, I would look at brand identity as a core feature, not as like, okay, I'm going to build a great brand reputation from day one, because that's impossible. But just looking at like the branding and the packaging as like a core feature to gain attention. That's kind of like the surface layer. But then even deeper than that, there needs to be a defensible value proposition that is like core to the product and to the customer, that like the way I think about it is like the time to the aha moment for the customer needs to be as small as possible. So like if I was at a dinner party and I just said in one line what my product was, and people were like, wow, like I totally get that, and I need that, or I know someone that needs that product, that's where I would start. Otherwise, I wouldn't even start, because a lot of CPG startups that I see today, the degree to which they are different than what else is in the market is so slight that like they have to test so much creative and come up with these grand stories and like tell the founder story and do all this stuff that at the end of the day, it is just not a defensible business model, that they're just spending so much money and spinning their wheels. And you used this term at the beginning of the call, wantrepreneur. There's so many wantrepreneurs that just want that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And then they find something and they're like, wow, this is it. And I don't want to discourage that, but like the amount that you have to, the amount of critical, feedback that you need to give to yourself and to your product, and like tweaking your product needs to be rapid, and it needs to be uncomfortable, because you've got to find that gap in your unique value proposition. So yeah, I would look for a space that has a lot of incumbents with very low innovation. Like ubiquitous brands, like you could think about like a beverage brand that's just everywhere, and it's kind of like played out at this point, and there's like no innovation. And I would look for a vertical like that, and then I would see, okay, what major difference could I introduce that they couldn't replicate in like one product cycle, and then I would start there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would use brand identity as a way to like garner attention. That's how I would approach that.
I think I agree with a lot of Jackson's points. For me, it's like, is the product used every day? Totally. Is it like, so there's like some sort of recurring revenue mechanism there. Is the average order value over 50, though I think that's like a tangential point. That might be like a fourth point. Mm-hmm. Is there relatively low competition in the space? I think in theory, you want to look at the industry and, pray that with that competition being relatively low, that it's a large enough market. So I think those are a couple things. And just because of the amount of D2C businesses that have launched in the past couple of years, a lot of these spaces have become really, really competitive, especially when you look at CPG. So
there's one other thing that I hear a lot of CPG founders say, there's a lot of talk about like creating new categories. That doesn't really apply actually in CPG, because everything is categorized either by the retailer or by the buyer. Like, we categorize things in our brains, and the way that retail, like Target, Erewhon, Whole Foods, the way that they buy is based on category. So you can like make the case that certain brands have created a category, but even like a keto cereal is still in the cereal category. And so I would just get away from that type of thinking. And I think Lucas's points are great as well. So I just wanted to mention that because I hear that all the time.
For some entrepreneurs though, they like, you have a passion, you want to launch it. That's fine, I think. And you should totally do that. For us though, having worked on the agency side with like tons of high growth businesses, like you just recognize that certain business models or certain competitive sets are just going to be a lot harder to scale. The businesses that can check off some of the boxes that we've been talking about though, their path of resistance in terms of like how fast they can scale is just a lot less. So that's, in my mind, if I was going to launch a consumer business, knowing how hard it is, those are the things that I would look for, because I'd want to build something that had, high scale inherently built into it.
Yeah.
Jim, what are you trying to scale right now in your studio?
Yeah, so I'll even hit on the framework of like with consumer, we chose I'll give you like our checklist. It's very similar to you all, where it's like, I like retention business models as opposed to acquisition business models. So that'd be like beauty or selling diapers where you're buying all the time, as opposed to selling a mattress, which is every 7 years. I like low return rate, where like selling pants, you're going to have a high return rate over 30%. Whereas if you sell a supplement or something, it's a very low return rate, right? So we're thinking through that. I like personas that are proactive rather than reactive. So like proactive would be a bride, a mom, someone trying to solve a problem like acne, as opposed to reactive could be, to be honest, a lot of like male consumers can fall into the reactive category. I actually like your point you said, Jackson, on category creation. I like taking a category and then just going like a segment below, where you can try and be like a little like mini monopoly or a market of one. So like the product we've worked on, it hits on, I'd say like 80% of our check boxes. It's a men's grooming product. It's dry shampoo for men in pomade form, where we're going after the American crew user. It's like, don't use like the cheap greasy option. If you have longer hair, use something that will actually dry your hair, not make it greasy. And so that's like a category we're looking at. We do a lot of stuff in the beauty space, which I think Lucas hits on your point of like, it can be over $50. It's high repeat purchase. It is saturated. So you have to have that like sub segment. But the other thing that we launched is a productized service, and the reason for that is, I think I said this before we recorded, is that we really suck at manufacturing, we've realized. And so we like stood up a website, we launched Handsome Chaos, we built a wait list of 1,000 people, we pre-sold it, and then we're like, okay, let's make the product. And that was over a year ago. It's taken forever to do formulation in that whole process. So with our productized service, we pulled out one service from GrowthHit and launched that, called One Day Design. And again, like you guys, like as agency owners, like we're good at process and systems, so we launched that one pretty quickly. But again, it's not like a SaaS where it's going to have a huge multiple at the end of it. But yeah, that's a little bit of how we
should chat more about the pomade, because I was talking to a startup the other week that's doing a mister shampoo. So it's technically like dry, but they're trying to do their own thing, but for women primarily.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to chat more about that. That's cool.
No, that'd be awesome. And we made it because I was like stealing my wife's products, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But But no, that's super cool. And what I struggle with is like, how do we fund this? Like, we're using profits from the agency, which is easy for productized service because that can be profitable on day one. And we're doing a limited buy of our product for Handsome Chaos on that we validated it. But after that, we need to do a bigger buy. So we're looking at options of like, oh, do we take on debt? Do we finance it ourselves? Do we raise money? And so those are conversations we're starting to think through, because I get super inspired by some of the startup studios like Pioneer Square Labs and Atomic VC and what they've done. But the whole flip of that is I talk to other agency owners that are like, don't start something, buy something. And like the idea of acquisition entrepreneurship, whereas I'm speaking to a guy who's acquired 3 companies and he's like, it's just addicting when you get into that. We just don't have that skill set or those reps in that. And that's another thing that we're curious about. But again, you can see that we have a little bit of shiny object syndrome on things we want to do.
Yeah.
But well, cool. Well, I know we're like running out of time. I like to end with one last question, which is, what is the nicest thing anyone's done for you all in your professional career?
I can start. This one's easy. I have a single mom, and when we were starting the agency, even pre-starting the agency, like Lucas mentioned, I was driving Uber just to pay rent. Which is not a crazy thing, but I was just like hacking together sources of income, and I told her, I said, I'm going to start this thing, and I really believe in it. And she floated me a certain amount of money as a loan that served as the launch pad for like just being able to live and have the runway to actually start something. So kind of like the first initial investment. And just on top of that, always supporting and never doubting whatever I set my mind to, and said like, I believe in myself, I want to do this. I truly believe like if I didn't have that support system, I don't know where I'd be or what I'd be doing. I certainly would not be as happy as I am in my day-to-day job. So that's an easy one for me.
That's a cool story. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Jackson's mom is the best. So I can attest. Yeah, I don't want to just steal Jackson's thunder. I have a lot to say about my parents too. They provided a similar like format, and I think we're very privileged in that way. I will just give a more practical example of something that was valuable for me when we were getting started. I got introduced to this other guy who has a really successful startup now in the health tech space, who is also named Lucas. He, on the point of financial modeling, he developed our entire first financial model for free, and was just like, nah, it's, don't worry about it. Just going to help you out. And I was always like, why did this guy do that? And he, in hindsight, he was just trying to help out another founder. And I really respected that, and try and kind of have that same mentality and pay that forward. So that was something really nice, and it helped me with all of those pricing exercises we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, especially when there's like nothing in it for them and they just do something to help. That's super cool. Well, again, thank you guys for going over. This was super fun. I feel like we could talk for another 10 hours on the highs and lows of agency life. But this was super fun. And again, congrats on what you guys are doing. Where can people go if they want to learn more about you guys or what you're building?
They can just visit our website, darkroomagency.com, Instagram, @darkroom agency. We have a lot of content that we're producing, our own podcast, which Jim will have to talk about. Yeah, there's a lot of literature and other things that they can follow us on, or LinkedIn too.
Awesome. Well, cool. We'll put that in the show notes. But again, thank you guys for coming on. This was super fun.
Thank you, Jim. Pleasure, man.
Thanks, Jim.
Have a good one.